Hello and welcome to the Doofcast, a film and TV podcast from Doof Media. My name is Scott Daly and I'm joined, as always, by the robot my future self sent back to teach me how to cry. It's Matt Freeman. How's it going, Matt?
Oh, it's going pretty good, Scott. I know now why you cry. It's because you were sick last week. That's why you cry.
I did so much crying and frustration when we had to cancel last week's episode. That's what I did.
Scott doesn't like canceling things even when he's horribly sick. It has to be me who's like, Scott, I'm going to be in big trouble if you go to the hospital because we kept doing podcasts.
It's true. And honestly, even this week, I was all better. And then I've done 2 nights of recording in a row and my throat's kind of like, maybe you shouldn't have done this, but I'm okay. We're back and we're ready to talk more Jim Cameron because this week on the show, our Deconstructing Director series continues with Cameron's 5th film. This is 1991's T2 Judgment Day, probably the movie that Matt Freeman has seen more than any other movie in the history of movies. Is that an accurate statement?
I think that might literally be an accurate statement. Yeah, rewatched it twice in preparation for this conversation, which was wholly unnecessary because, as with every Cameron movie, I have it memorized. Yeah,
totally memorized. Close your eyes right now. What happens 37 minutes into the movie?
I believe that we're roughly in the Sarah Connor beginning to escape from the mental institution.
I can't check it. I'm going to assume it's right.
It probably is right.
So we're going to be reviewing T2 Judgment Day. We're going to be talking all about that. It's going to be a very good conversation. And also we're going to wrap up the episode. Matt, we got to do a thing that I need you to talk me off of a ledge here because the final Ghostbusters Afterlife trailer came out just a couple days ago and I'm not happy. And I don't like being the negative, not happy person, but this trailer made me very angry and I need to talk to you about it.
All right. I can't wait to have an angry conversation about Ghostbusters.
No one has ever had an angry conversation about Ghostbusters before.
Yeah.
All right, but let's get right into this week's main topic and talk all about Terminator 2 Judgment Day.
Same make.
These were taken at the West Highland Police Station, 1984. You were there.
Same model.
These were taken today.
You have to let me see my son. He's in great danger.
New mission. Once, he was programmed to destroy the future.
You don't know what it's like to try to kill one of these things.
Now, his mission...
Get down.
...is to protect it.
Mom! Come with me if you want to live.
Matt, what is this movie all about?
A cyborg, identical to the one who failed to kill Sarah Connor, must now protect her 10-year-old son John from a more advanced and powerful cyborg.
This movie was written by James Cameron and his longtime friend William Wisher. That's actually the guy who wrote the short film that was financed by a cabal of dentists. So long-term friend he brought in to help write this movie with him. It stars Arnold Schwarzenegger, Linda Hamilton, and introducing Edward Furlong in, I guess, we can just get this out of the way. This is peak Furlong because I barely remember anything else he's been in after this. Poor kid actually suffered from a lot of substance abuse problems, and poor Edward Furlong has had a very tough life. But
it's a shame. It tends to happen a lot to the younger actors.
Yeah, definitely.
But I don't know where to start with this conversation, but that might be one place to start, right? Is the fact that people are too hard on Edward Furlong, and he actually does great, and he serves as the heart of this movie.
Yeah, he definitely does. We were talking about this right before we started recording, that something I never realized. I was looking into some of the trivia of this movie. Edward Furlong was around 12, 13 years old when this movie was filming. And you know what happens in that time of your life, Matt? A lot of things change.
What are you talking about?
And so his voice completely changed during the course of filming so badly to the effect that basically every line of dialogue in this movie is ADR'd after the fact because they had to go in because his voice was no longer matching from scene to scene. And of course, as you know, movies are shot out of order. So it's not like you could see, oh, he's growing up during the course of it. No, the desert scene, he looks clearly younger than he is in earlier scenes in the movie. he did a lot of growing up over the course of this movie. I read actually that they had to like dig a hole for him to stand in, so when he's standing next to Linda Hamilton, his height matches other parts of the movie.
That's funny. So he must have been right in the middle of a growth spurt if that's the case, because I feel like I wouldn't have even noticed, but maybe I'm underestimating how much a teenage boy grows when he's hitting his major growth spurt.
I feel like if you go back with this knowledge in hand, and you go back and look at like one of his first scenes in the movie, and then look back at the scene when they're in the desert, I think you can see he looks noticeably younger in the desert.
Mm-hmm.
He just has a much younger face. He hadn't quite gone through puberty yet, and then boom, it all happened. So I mean, I think I've always kind of personally felt that a lot of Furlong's dialogue felt a little stilted to me in the way that, you know, kid dialogue sometimes feels, where they don't get to the depth of the emotion that you quite need them to be.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I know that so much of it was ADR'd, that makes sense, because it's hard enough for a young actor to get into the zone to kind of give a great performance like that, and then also to ask them to do it while sitting in a cold studio months later where their acting partner isn't even in the room with them. That's a whole nother thing. So
Mm-hmm.
I think despite all that, you're absolutely right. I think Edward Furlong does a really great job here. This is a very important role. It's such an interesting character because he has to play like multiple types of John Connor, right? I think at the beginning of the movie, he's a John Connor that has basically accepted that all this crazy shit his mom told him his entire life is a lie.
Mm-hmm.
And she was just insane. And so he's just kind of come to accept that. But also he's not like other kids because he spent his youth learning how to be a soldier and how to fight and how to do things. And also kind of being told that nothing right now matters because it's all going to end. You know, I think that's probably where a lot of his bucking of authority comes from. It's like, what does it matter if I steal $300 from an ATM machine if in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, the world is going to cease to exist as we know it?
Yeah, right. I agree. And then of course, as the movie progresses, he transforms right into the version of, you know, who we can imagine this is actually the guy who's going to lead humanity against the machines, because he's it's a really good movie actually. It's funny because it's when I, you know, rewatch it as an adult after having watched it a million times as a kid, I was kind of worried that it wasn't going to hold together, that it was going to be, you know, just an action movie. And I mean, it's a pretty long movie actually. And yes, like a lot of James Cameron movies, like the entire last half of it and several pieces toward the beginning are giant action scenes, but it actually really slows down and takes its time with the building, you know, tonal sense of dread of the future and this like nihilism, but there's like a tinge of hope there. There's so many great scenes where it's just like Sarah Connor sitting there smoking a cigarette with a 1,000-yard stare. And you know, there's the whole thing where she goes to kill Miles Dyson is like this incredibly dark, just kind of excellently horrible plot movement where I can't really think of many things that make me feel as strongly as that sequence does, because you know, just like think about what you have here is you've got basically your protagonist, for all intents and purposes, deciding to go on a mission which is equivalent to the mission of the Terminator in the first movie, which is kill the person responsible for, you know, the thing, right? So she's becoming a Terminator, right? Mm-hmm. She dresses up and gets weapons and she goes to murder this man, and we've already kind of, you know, very deftly established like this is just like a family guy. He's just a computer nerd. He has no idea what he's doing. He's basically innocent. Yeah. And terrorizes his family. It's I think it's like the most brutal and violent part of the movie because it's one of the few times where, you know, somebody actually appears to be hurt by getting shot. And I don't know, I could just walk through the whole rest of the scene, but it's just this viscerally upsetting and deeply dramatic kind of horrible sequence that ends with her finally realizing like I should listen to my son because I'm losing it.
Yeah, I mean, it's really like this is a movie where John Connor is teaching the Terminator what it means to be human and what it means to value life, like teaching the irony of teaching a Terminator. That's why I love like the final line in this movie is so perfect, because like if a machine can learn to value human life, then there's hope for the rest of us. That's just wonderful. And so that's what this movie is. And I love that we use Sarah Connor as a foil to that. You're absolutely right. She becomes a Terminator. And the great line where Edward Furlong is rushing to stop his mom, and the Terminator is kind of like, but if she does kill him, it will stop Judgment Day. And he's like incredulous, and it's like, don't you get it? Don't you understand yet? And so we have these two characters that couldn't be further on opposite sides of this whole thing, that like Sarah Connor is very slow to trust this Terminator for obvious reasons, and yet they find themselves allied in the cold calculation of what eliminating a person would do. It's really powerful stuff. And this is, like, I like Terminator a lot. Yeah. That is a relatively simple movie. It's just Arnold is chasing them the whole time, basically. And you do have these wonderful scenes between Kyle Reese and Sarah Connor that I think elevate the movie a little bit. But this movie is not just like a continuous chase scene. It's actually surprising when you look at like the runtime of the movie, how little the T-1000 is in the movie.
Yeah.
Because you have this whole middle part of the movie where going to stop Cyberdyne has nothing to do with the T-1000, and he just kind of stumbles in at the very end of their whole mid-movie arc. And then it's, oh yeah, we were running away from this thing, and then that takes us to the end of the movie. So we kind of just go away from that and to do something else, and to take, like, it's not about running, it's about taking control and taking action. And I think we talked in the Terminator episode about the difference between a 1984 movie and a 91 movie, pre end of Cold War, post end of Cold War. And I think like it became even more evident, the difference watching this movie. I think there's a line in this movie where Arnold is explaining what's going to happen, that Cyberdyne Skynet will launch nukes at Russia. And Furlong's response is, but aren't they our friends now? And that's so fascinating, because like when this movie came out in 1991, the Soviet Union still technically existed. I don't think it fully disintegrated until the very end of 91. Like the Berlin Wall had fallen 2 years before. So like the writing was on the wall. The Soviet Union was like slowly dismantling itself, but it was still a thing up until the very end of this year. So like this is very fresh. The Cold War is over. There's hope for the future again time period when this movie is being written, and you can kind of see that written all over the movie. Just this idea of like we're at the end of this dark tunnel, and suddenly, oh my god, we could get out of this without blowing each other up. That's crazy. That's like just the audacity to hope for that kind of future. I mean, that's something that I think we see it in Linda Hamilton's character when she like witnesses the nukes explode, but that's something that like we don't think about. This was a clear and present thought in our parents' minds probably a lot. Like parents grew up doing those drills, and they're probably thought about that all the time.
Yeah. There's a lot of parts of this movie that really emotionally impact me, and I think maybe like 60% of that is because this movie is ingrained on my psyche on such a deep level from watching so many times. But I think a lot of it, like the once again, just speaking of like the weight of the things this movie does, the whole sequence where she dreams that she's, it's a beautiful idea. Like you're dreaming, you see the younger, innocent version of yourself, or like a version of yourself that could have been the version of yourself that doesn't know all the horrible things playing with your child the way it should have been, right? The way it should have been if this horrible thing hadn't happened to you, and if you didn't know what you know, and you're trying to warn her, you're trying to warn this younger version of yourself, run, and she's saying other things. You can read her lips, basically. I don't remember what else she's saying, but like, and then of course, the bomb kills everyone, and it's the image which people use as like a reaction GIF now, where all the meme. Flesh is blown off of her body. But it's like, that's an incredibly just viscerally impactful and like perfectly done just image of the terror of the nuclear war that we were all living under at that time. I mean, you and I were too. We didn't realize it necessarily.
Yeah, we just weren't aware of it.
Yeah, right. Like I mean, I watch that now, even when we don't really think about, the prospect of nuclear war, and it still really affects me to, it's just one of those things where when you have kids, you start to empathize a lot more with any situation like that.
Sure.
But there's so much stuff like that where it's like, it's not just an action movie. Like it's an amazingly good action movie, but it's also got all this great emotional, like iconic stuff, right? Like that's why they keep making Terminator movies.
Yeah.
Is because these movies have these iconic scenes where it's like, well, there's no better way to do that. No one can ever make that scene again, because Terminator 2 did the playground gets annihilated by a nuclear explosion scene.
Yeah.
And we're done. Terminator 2 got to do that. And now nobody else gets to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I love everything with Dyson too. Like the Dyson realizes the thing he was responsible for scene is really great too. And I like Sarah Connor's like indignant, like men like you, like she's just disgusted by him. There's like you just wanted to do this because you wanted to see if you could. Like it's to go back to our nuclear bomb metaphor. It's basically people part of the Manhattan Project, like having a person from the future coming to tell them, yep, what you did wipes out humanity. So how are you going to feel about that now? And how would you process that? And I think the Dyson character is such a wonderful one. I don't think, literally seen this movie dozens of times, I don't think it's ever really occurred to me now that the weighted thing he uses to hit the switch that blows up the bomb is a piece of the thing he was working on, a piece of the neural network that he was working on, which is the perfect visual metaphor of him using the thing that he was going to create to destroy everything.
Mm-hmm. It's his bane. It's the thing that kills him. Yeah, I did notice that, but not until the maybe 400th or 500th time that I saw the movie. But
I always wondered what it was, because I was like, is that like a dumbbell? I was like, what is he holding, a dumbbell?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember a specific difference between the extended cut, the director's cut, and the normal cut, because in the extended cut he definitely borrows the axe from Arnold and then uses it to break the big machine, the neural network computer apart.
I think the extended cut has an earlier scene with him at home. With his wife is chastising him for his work, and he's like pointing out the neural network thing on his desk. And I think that's what probably on this time drew my attention to it more, because I didn't even realize I was watching the extended cut until I started seeing things, and I was like, I don't quite remember seeing this as often. And I was like, yeah, I guess I'm doing the extended cut. Like there's that whole scene where they remove the Terminator's chip and flip on his like learning computer, which is just in the original cut is just a thing that he had and it was on at all times. But this, they have to specifically turn it on.
Yeah, I think that's one of the few things from the extended cut that I think is unambiguously a good addition, actually.
Yeah.
The idea of having, because it establishes, the idea that now he's learning, in contrast, I think, to the T-1000. And he proceeds to actually, learn. Like there's a lot of moments where I think my favorite one is, John Connor makes fun of him for starting the car in, a very Terminator-ish way, and shows him that the keys are right there. And then at the end, he finds the keys.
Yeah.
In the SWAT vehicle that way. And I also, I mean, there's so much. I was going to say this a minute ago, and I just want to fit in just how much I love his arc, where he goes from, John Connor makes him promise not to kill anyone, and he's like annoyed, doesn't understand, super not down for it, but he has to follow orders. The first thing he does is brutally shoot the guy in the legs and go, he'll live, because he's just like, I don't give a shit about this. I'm technically going to follow orders, but I'm a Terminator, goddammit. And then by the end, he takes the minigun, and John's like, hey, you swore you wouldn't kill anyone. And he's like, trust me, smiling, which is the other thing that John taught him to do.
Yes, I love the original smile scene where he looks so fucking scary.
So that's his arc, right? He's actually coming to understand people and understand like the value of life in some way. And
well, yeah, because the whole mission to stop Cyberdyne, like he he becomes invested into it. That's the thing I was really paying attention to this time. It's not just like John Connor ordered him to help with the mission to stop Cyberdyne, and therefore he's going to do it. Like he becomes invested in the mission to succeed. Like he becomes like he wants this as well. He wants to stop Skynet. He decides for himself that that's something he cares about because he can save human life that way. And I mean that's why he sacrifices himself at the end. It's because he makes the choice that that mankind is better without his existence. And now you could argue like it's so funny because like there's another extended scene that's I don't think in the original cut is him talking to John in the bunker where all the weapons are stored, and something to the effect of like, so you're not afraid of death, you're not afraid of dying. And he's like, no, you know, I do my mission and I need to stay alive to do my mission, but I don't care about anything after that. And I don't think that's true by the end. I think he doesn't want to die. He doesn't want to leave John. He's developed these strong emotional fatherly feelings for John Connor, and he doesn't want to leave, but he knows it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's one of my favorite, if not my favorite, you know, robot learns to understand humanity movies. And once again, Arnold does a fantastic job. Like this is one of the like handful of movies where you can say Arnold absolutely kills it.
Yeah. I mean, because he's marrying the pitch perfect performance from the first movie with just the general Arnold charisma. It's this perfect combination of these two different things that just work so well in this movie. He's dripping with charisma in a movie where he's playing a robot, and it just works. It just completely works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And while still being the guy who you know messes up all the bikers at the beginning of the movie, and then you know turns like that's the fun thing about this movie is it takes the Terminator, which is really just, you know, a violent action movie, like very enjoyable for adults, but kind of a bit much, I think, for younger people. But Terminator 2 is like a heartwarming story. It's a story about finding a surrogate father and a robot finding a surrogate son, and a mother coming to heal. You know, it's absolutely positive and hopeful, and you know,
yeah, man, it's the 90s.
Yeah, exactly. But it's got a kid main character. Like you can see why we love this movie so much as kids. I think the fun thing for me to realize now, and it's not like I just watched this movie again for the first time in a long time. I've watched it, you know, intermittently over the years, and just kind of realized like, oh, I didn't just like it because it has Edward Furlong and I could empathize with the kid. I liked it because it's a fucking great movie. And of course, I think now I probably empathize more with Sarah Connor, whereas sure. I didn't so much when I identified more with Edward Furlong when I was a kid. That's just true. But you know, her arc is also amazing, and her performance is amazing, and
she's incredible. She's absolutely incredible. I forget every time I go a few months without watching this movie, and then I watch it again, and I'm like, her establishing scene doing the pull-ups on the upturned bed inside the mental health place is just the perfect way to establish who Sarah Connor has become. Like it's just pitch perfect. Like you don't need a line of dialogue. You just know how hardened and fucked up she's become because of the pressure, the weight of this thing that she knows is going to happen, and has for the longest time kind of felt like she couldn't do anything to stop it, and all she could do was prepare her son the best she could.
Yeah. There are very few scenes in film that give me chills. I don't know if there's more than a couple, really, and one of them is Sarah, you know, having kicked everybody's ass very, very cleverly, broken out of this institution in a way that's just like a series of very smart, subtle things that she's done to plan this escape, you know. And
yeah, the Drano in the syringe always ekes me out because she's fucking got the syringe in the guy's neck already. It's like, you better not accidentally press down at all on that.
Exactly. And she just looks so just like deranged. It's amazing. So she's just dispensed with everyone. She's, you know, confident in her escape. She turns the corner, the elevator opens, and the Terminator steps out, and she just melts down and panics and is completely terrified. And that scene, pretty much every time I watch this movie, I will have like a I keep saying the word visceral. It's because it's the right word. It's the word that means like I feel it in my body, right? Like that's how much this movie is affecting me. And again, that's probably because I watched it a million times. I admit that, but it's just so good.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, it shows like just how traumatized she is by this guy and this event. And yeah, I mean, she runs literally back towards the people she was just running away from.
Yeah.
And they're surrounding her, about to give her a sedative, and all she can think about and all she can look at is the Terminator. Like she doesn't even hear John's voice until much later.
Yeah.
Until like Arnold has already dispatched all the orderlies. That's when she hears John's voice, which, I mean, he throws an orderly through a glass window. Like he's probably not okay.
He'll live.
Like that's like with the guard out front. Yes, he will probably technically live. He's probably never going to walk right for the rest of his life.
Yeah, no, he shot him in exactly the right place to miss his arteries, because and that guy, he threw him very carefully through the window. So
definitely didn't slice his chest up with glass shards as he fell through the window. Yeah, no, he's fine. He's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I love it all. Like, I guess the one fun thing that this movie really does, and I think we talked about this when we talked about it with our Australian friends on their show a year or so ago, but like the fake out that it does, the idea that if you watch this movie for the first time, you legitimately do not know that Arnold is the good guy until all three characters, till John, Arnold, and the T-1000 meet for the first time. And it's this wonderful fake out. I still am infuriated that the marketing for this movie spoiled that. Apparently like all the early marketing, Cameron was very specific about like, I don't want them together on posters. I don't want them standing next to each other. I don't want anything. And then all the trailer marketing just shows that he's the good guy. And it's like, you fucking ruined it. Because it's such a good moment. It's such a really good moment where they both kind of standing on opposite sides of each other. And just the way that the movie goes out of its way to set it up. I mean, you have, just like in the first movie, it's Arnold that appears first. He goes into the biker bar. He kills people in there. He stabs the guy right in the chest with this thing, takes his clothes. Like this is all beat for beat, almost the first movie. And then the T-1000 shows up. We don't see him kill that cop, although he certainly did. The camera kind of cleverly moves out of the way, and then he dresses up as a police officer. And this is, I think, a really interesting thing Cameron is doing in this movie with the T-1000 being a cop, because, objectively, it's advantageous for him to be a cop because he can just move unassaulted throughout the city. Like I was thinking about, when he's chasing John Connor through the mall, like if Arnold Schwarzenegger is chasing John Connor through the mall, probably other people are going to be like, hey, something's going on here. We got to try to stop this guy. Not that they could, but just a cop chasing a little kid through the mall, everyone's just immediately like, oh, the kid's up to no good. The kid's being bad. So like he can just basically move through the city unhindered by anything.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very, it feels very different from Terminator 1, where, like in that movie, he was like grungy, like it was evident that he smelled like rotting flesh because people would react to his presence. He was kind of gradually falling apart, and it was a much more like kind of gross body horror, like just the whole sequence where he tries to repair his his hand and pulls out his eye and all that. Whereas T-1000, it's this the movie is actually somewhat color coded to a degree, because a lot of the scenes with T-1000 are this very cold blue color, and there's a lot of orange and blue, which is a fairly common color scheme in movies. But like, you just for example, think about when he arrives at Dyson's house and everything is cold blue except where the fire is illuminating, and it's orange, and you see the fire reflecting in his aviators, and it's just this this great image, obviously. But like he's very cold, he's very disdainful of his prey, of both Arnold and the humans.
It's so funny because on retrospect it's like really obvious, because like the way Kyle Reese was introduced in this movie is so different from the way the T-1000 is introduced. Like but the movie kind of knows you're going to let your assumptions go just go, and it successfully manipulates you in that way. And I think successfully manipulates you in just this assumption of cop equals good, right? Like this general assumption, oh, he's pretending to be a cop. So he's on the side of good. And I think the movie's doing something clever with that, because this movie takes place in Los Angeles. It is 1991. I think the Rodney King murder happened, I think, while they were filming this movie is when that happened. And the riots happened. I think actually I read somewhere that the biker bar that they filmed at for the Arnold scene was like across the street from where Rodney King was beaten to death. And that might have happened one of the nights they were filming, like weird coincidences like that. So it's a time, especially when you set something in Los Angeles, that the police are not looked very favorably upon. And I think Cameron is using that very cleverly here to kind of comment on a lot of the stuff.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. You know, the villain is the cop, and and I mean, not only that, of course, but the whole ending finale action sequence is them fighting like 50 million cops, including ASAC Hank Schrader wearing a gas mask.
I've always loved seeing Hank. Every time I watch this movie, I was like, "Oh my god, he's in this!" I forgot. Yeah,
right. That's
He's
Hank. Everyone
that sees the bomb.
Probably dies. Honestly,
probably.
I don't think they had enough time to get away.
Yeah.
But yeah, and the cops are not only the enemies, but they're also pretty incompetent, because
yes,
Arnold. I mean, what exactly? If a guy is standing there with a an anti-tank minigun, and he's like you should already be running. Like, what's your plan exactly? And the helicopter should have not even been anywhere near that. So anyway,
it's interesting though that like in 1991, these cops are, for the most part, they have pistols. They don't have a lot of body armor. There's like one SWAT team that has gas. I feel like a 2021 version of this movie, the cops are so fucking heavily geared. It's a completely different situation.
Yeah, that would be an interesting, extension of the commentary, is like, John, it is actually much harder to deal with the cops now because they are so heavily armored.
Look at all this military equipment we've given our police officers for no reason. I think it's fascinating. I was definitely thinking about that, as like most of these, like the biggest gun a cop has in any of this movie is a shotgun, right? Like that's it. Like they have like one shotgun in their car, and then everyone else, all the rest of them are using pistols that are basically completely useless.
Yeah. The only deviation from that is the SWAT team that goes into the building basically has MP5s, which they look like MP5s. I don't know if they actually are, but they're like a small submachine gun. Yeah, and it's not.
They don't have tanks. They don't have any tanks. They would have tanks now.
Yeah, they'd have tanks. They'd have, I don't know.
Full assault rifles. They'd have full body armor. I mean, they'd look like soldiers, basically.
Yeah. Yep. As it is, they have a van, and they have some
body armor.
Yeah.
Some machine guns and some body armor. That's it. Yeah.
And the helicopter that they have is, it's I don't actually know.
Not really. I don't know a lot about helicopters, but it's not like a tactical helicopter. Right. Like it's just your basic helicopter.
Yeah, it doesn't have any means of shooting out of the helicopter. It's just for spotting.
Yeah, it's definitely just for spotting for sure. Yeah.
There was one other thing that I never noticed until I was older, is how when T-1000 is flying the helicopter, he has two hands flying the helicopter and two hands loading and firing the gun.
It's such a good little detail. I mean, this is like, we talked about this in Terminator, right? Where we were talking about how much I love the action scenes, because the little beats of the action scenes that the movie just kind of puts in there and doesn't really comment on. They just kind of, like, Cameron just moves the camera to like down a little bit, so you catch the extra arm that's holding onto the stick, and that's it. And we just kind of move on with that. And you just kind of chuckle about it and move on.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that going on here.
Yeah. So that I just want to focus on that car chase, helicopter / car / truck / car. I have no idea how they did that.
Crazily.
It looks perfect. Like there's nothing, like I was watching it one of the more recent times I watched it, and I was just like, I had to remind myself that none of this is CGI. Yeah. This is all either they're actually crashing all these cars and getting these amazing shots,
Yes,
or I'm being very cleverly kind of hoodwinked, and they're filming things that are not quite what I think I'm seeing, but due to the way it's cut, it has the right effect. And in either case, it's an unbelievable sequence.
it's incredible. I mean, like just the helicopter going under the bridge.
Yeah.
And the camera following it. Like that's James fucking Cameron.
Uh-huh.
And I mean literally in that none of his cameramen would do that scene because he was like, all right, so the helicopter is going to go on the bridge and then you in the car with the camera are going to be right fucking behind it. So like if it hits anything, it's going to immediately crash into you and kill you.
Uh-huh.
And all his camera people were like, no, I'm not doing that. And so Jim Cameron's like, okay, fine. I'll do it. And he did it. He shot those shots because no one else would do it.
Oh my God.
It's just insane. It's just absolutely insane. But it's textbook Jim Cameron. Where like, this is the shot he wanted. This is the shot he was going to get. He wanted to be as close to that fucking helicopter as possible. And I mean, it's a good shot. It works. It's really impressive. Like, just like how often do you see a fucking helicopter go under a bridge?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, nowadays probably you see it a lot because it's all CG, but this like literally you can tell it's real because you can tell the helicopter is totally stationary. It's not dipping up or down in any way because the helicopter pilot's probably like, oh my God, oh my God,
yeah.
oh my God.
Yeah, just gotta stay right. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's that. There's the jackknifed semi containing liquid nitrogen sliding at what appears to be a high rate of speed with what appears to be actually Arnold Schwarzenegger sitting on top of it.
The only effect in that sequence that doesn't work for me, and the only effect that doesn't work for me in the whole movie, is when he jumps / is flung off of the top of the rig. It looks fake. It looks fake. Yeah,
but I agree. That's it though. That's
it. That's the only shot in the whole movie.
Yeah. I mean, like the T-1000 CGI is also kind of like, yeah, this is from the early 90s, but whatever. He's supposed to be liquid metal, so who cares?
Yeah, it works. It works in the same way that, like, you know, The Thing works. Where like when I watch The Thing, do I think that that's a real alien, like sitting there, or do I think it's a puppet? No, like I do think it's a puppet. It's just like a really fucking impressive puppet that I think looks gross and disgusting in all the right ways.
Yeah.
And that's how I feel about the T-1000. It's like, can I tell that's computer graphics? Yes.
Yeah.
Does it look perfect?
Right.
Yes.
And they're very clever, you know, with switching between CGI and, you know, like the time when they shoot him in the face when he's trying to get in the elevator and his face like splits open. I'm pretty sure that's a very good like cutting between the actor with prosthetics and the CGI of the face healing and so forth, in ways where you can't really tell which is which and it all just blends together.
Every time they do him getting like sliced in half and stuff, where it's like you can tell it's not CG and it's practical because like the liquid metal it's much more tangible. It's like it's a different texture a little bit, but it's really cool. It's really cool. Like I love that detail, and I also love that Jim Cameron has to do like the hardest possible thing at all times, where it's like not only does Sarah Connor shoot the T-1000 through the eye and open up a hole in his head, but then we're going to position the shot so you can see through the hole in his head and see Sarah Connor on the other side of it. It's just like, God, man, you're crazy. Like that's just like 10 times more complicated of an effect you've just decided to do there.
Yeah. Another kind of example of this sort of thing that I still like, even now, like I watched it and I was like, I'm going to watch this and try to ruin it for myself. Like I'm going to try to see what they did to trick me. And really what I'm talking about is when T-1000 is beating the shit out of Arnold and smashing his head with the big conveyor or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's simply just very clever trickery in cutting where as far as your brain is concerned, Arnold's getting his face smashed with the giant conveyor and his flesh is being ripped off and you can see his metal skeleton underneath. And like you're just totally convinced, despite the fact that you know very well that there's not even any way that prosthetic looks good in person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's supposed to be his skeleton, but you can't do that because it has to be added on top of his existing face. So every time you shoot him with that prosthetic, it has to be at an angle that allows it to work. So it's like just so precise to get these things to work and actually fool you, even when you're like watching, like paying attention, like, okay, where's the trick? And it's like, well, the trick is just, again, like I said, like cutting between real and prosthetic and model and CGI in ways where you can't quite put your finger on it, and so your brain just stitches it together into a seamless progression of events.
Yeah, 100%. It's so good. I look at that scene every time too, where I'm like, and there are definitely moments in it where I can say, okay, yeah, that's a prosthetic, or that's just a puppet.
Yeah.
That's its face being smashed.
Yeah. Well, it's like, because you're like, that can't be Arnold because he would be dead. So
yeah. Right. But like, I mean, you compare that moment with like in the original Terminator from 7 years before, where he's fixing his eye, and it's very, very obvious that that's a puppet. Like it's just Jim Cameron's, I mean, technology has gotten better, but Jim Cameron's understanding of how to shoot special effects like went like crazy, like leaps and bounds.
Yeah, right. I think that's, worth giving a major props for, because it's not just like, oh yeah, it was one of the first movies with CGI in it. It's like the level of ingenuity and cleverness and fun, just little throwaway things, like throwing T-1000 at the wall. He kind of like goes splat against the wall, and then his face comes out of the back of his head, and he just flips himself in like half a second, right? And it's like that alone was an amazing CGI marvel at the time, right? There's
all kinds of fun stuff like that, like him walking through the bars, where he just goes through the bars, but then his gun gets stuck. Like the little detail of his gun gets stuck, and he has to turn it is just such a fun little detail that just makes the T-1000 more memorable. Like the thing that just like always disturbed me was where he's using the claw hooks on the back of the car, and the Terminator shoots one off, and Edward Furlong like reaches out and grabs the little piece of metal and then like immediately throws it away, like he's disgusted by it.
Yeah,
it's such fun little details like that.
Yeah, because for all he knows, it's still dangerous, right?
Yeah,
and you feel that too. You're like, oh, should he even be touching it? Yeah, maybe that thing will try to kill him by itself.
Yeah. It's so cool. It's so great. It's such a fun idea, and I think the movie uses that fun idea to its fullest. Like I love when he's just the floor, and then rises up and kills that poor cop.
Yeah.
I like the use of the knives and the use of just like when he stabs into the elevator and then switches from the long sword to the two picks to open the elevator. Like all this stuff is such ingenious, like sitting down in a room and saying, okay, we have a guy who can do this. What would that look like? And how would they use that? And every choice there is smart and interesting and fun.
Yeah. It's funny. I just kind of realized something that I've never really consciously thought about before, is like, you don't show what he's doing up on top of the elevator, which is perfect. Like you don't want to see what he's doing. You want it to be like, what is he doing up there? And how is he doing that exactly? And then you're sort of forced to imagine, like, are these his arms? Or has he given up all semblance of being a person? like it's kind of terrifying that you can't see him during that sequence.
Yeah.
I think it works really well, actually.
It does. And his running is so good. I actually read that, what is the actor's name? I'm blanking. Patrick something? Robert Patrick?
Robert Patrick, yes.
Yeah. I read he like trained really hard on running and only breathing through his nose. Like he trained really hard to be able to sprint without having to breathe through his mouth, so it would look like he's exerting no effort, to the point where he actually was in too good a shape and was catching up to Robert Furlong's scooter. And so like he had to consciously slow down, which is just a fun little thing. Like it shows everyone was super committed to all this stuff, and like we talked about in the first Terminator, how committed Arnold was to making his movement seem real and also making it seem like he was an expert with all the guns. And it's good to see Robert Patrick like did a lot of similar stuff here with the T-1000, which let's talk about the T-1000 for a bit, because this is a really fascinating character. He's definitely a machine, but I think unlike Arnold's villain in the first movie, he's definitely like stuffed to the brim with personality.
Mm-hmm.
Like he doesn't show it in the way a human would show it, but he is constantly making choices in this movie that are not necessarily the most optimal computer choice,
Mm-hmm.
but are just a reflective of his wants and desires.
Yeah.
And his curiosity and cruelty. And I think that's really, really fascinating because the movie never really specifically comments on it. It never comments on how this T-1000 works. Is it a learning computer as well? What is it learning? Why is it the way it is? But man, he's a vindictive little angry robot.
Yeah. Yeah. He's like I said, disdainful. He's
Yeah.
very superior. Like there's a lot of moments where, you know, he could we were talking about this earlier. Like he could have probably killed them if he hadn't picked several moments to just be like, I don't even need to kill you right now because
there's, the moment at the very end of the movie where he's got Sarah Connor, he's pinned her into the wall with a finger knife. And then he says, call out to John. And there is no reason that this robot should ever need to do that. He can perfectly imitate Sarah Connor in voice and look. He doesn't need her to do that, but he wants her to do that. He wants the satisfaction of her being responsible for her son's death.
Yeah. Yeah. And he enjoys getting to torture her after chasing her for so long also. And like he and you know this because he later gives her the little finger wag.
Yeah.
Which, you know,
it's so good.
It's not just saying like, you know, bad girl, but it's like, remember this finger that I'm going to now stab you with again. And like, yeah, I mean, and of course the fact that he, you know, he beats Arnold, but then he leaves him stuck. This was the thing you were pointing out earlier. And allows him to come back later, you know, because he didn't finish him then. I mean, basically just continually underestimates Arnold. And I think that's because he's disdainful of this old model who he just sees himself as being so superior to that he's just beneath him to even bother, you know, making sure that he's taking him out. And then, you know, when he does decide to take him out, he's just so like, I mean, think about the fact that he like just throws him around, smashes him around, just beats him with that metal pole. And only after he's kind of gotten out his frustration does he finally decide to stab him in a place where it seems like he just knows that like that's the place to stab him, right?
That's power source, yeah.
Yes.
But at the same time, he should know that Arnold has the ability to reroute power to a backup power source.
He should.
But he's just so indifferent to the T-800 that he just doesn't want to.
Yeah.
And it's really great. Like I think his line to Sarah Connor when he's trying to get her to call out to John it's a really interesting line in context because he says, I know this hurts. And it's like, well, how in what way do you mean you know it hurts? Like you don't experience pain, presumably. So it's just like in an abstract kind of way, like part of his programming is to be aware of the pain that you can cause and the pressure points. And cause he stabs her right in like her shoulder, like socket area. Like it's gotta hurt like crazy.
Yeah.
It's so fascinating that like that line, that stood out to me. I know this hurts.
Yeah.
It's like you only abstractly though, right? Like theoretically.
I think because he enjoys the idea of hurting people. Like I mean, this is kind of reaching, right? But it feels like this is a sort of machine that has been programmed to enjoy inflicting pain.
Yeah.
And you just said something interesting. You said that he doesn't feel pain. And, you know, there's maybe 2 or 3 times in the movie where they damage him badly enough that he starts making that like
screeching noise. Yeah.
Like really awesome, unsettling, inhuman screeching noise. And then he always seems kind of pissed off afterward. And with the final time being the time they hit him with the grenade at the end. And that makes me feel like he doesn't like it when that happens.
Yeah.
You can call that pain, perhaps.
It's not necessarily that he like there's a line from Arnold earlier in the movie where he's saying like, I have receptors that tell me that when I've been damaged, you could call that pain. I think the T-1000 probably has something similar, but it's such a different type of machine that like who knows what they're actually experiencing. But yeah, I mean, you're totally right that like every time he's damaged to a significant amount, he's crying out and making noises in weird ways. Man, I can't tell you how many times I've seen this movie, and still every time Sarah Connor is like one-armed cocking the shotgun and shooting him where he's backing up to the edge, I'm like, yes, one more, just one more.
Yeah.
Like I know how this movie ends, but yet every time it's such a great moment, and it's just like just right there at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And then Arnold saves the day.
Yeah. Yep. The wonderfully beaten up and destroyed Arnold. I had a toy of that Arnold when I was a kid with the torn up face, and you could shine a light through his head. And
yeah. Isn't it ironic that in the original movie, as the movie went along, Arnold became more and more machine to reflect his complete drive and inhumanity.
Mm-hmm.
And in this movie, the more bits of machine that are revealed in Arnold, almost the more human he becomes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like that. He is getting steadily torn up for the last half of the movie, you could say.
Yeah.
That's a cool observation. I don't know what else, Scott. This is.
I mean, I like there's so many things to talk about. The LA River scene is pitch perfect. It's just so good. Everything about it is so fun. I actually read that they didn't originally plan for the semi, like the top of the cab to get chopped off, but then they brought it down into the LA River and realized it was too tall.
Mm-hmm.
And so they just wrote it into the script that it was going to drive through it in the top. So they had to plan a whole special effect around that and do that whole thing. But that works perfectly. I love how like Cameron in that scene, he does this thing where he gets the camera really, really low to the ground a lot. Like the camera is like barely off of the road in so much of that sequence, whether we're in front of the semi, behind the semi, with John on the bike, with Arnold and John on the bike, on the bigger bike. Like he keeps so low to the ground, which is just a perfect cheat to make yourself look like you're moving faster than you are. I know this because I played EverQuest for 10 years, and when you're a gnome, you feel like you're moving faster when you're in first person mode because you're lower to the ground. But I mean, it's a perfect way of just making everything seem fast. Like who knows how fast these vehicles were actually traveling, but you just stick the camera right next to the road and you have the road flying by and it just looks fast and frantic and perfect. I don't know why people don't use the LA River more in sequences.
I do want to take this as a framework for talking about how he's just such a brilliant action director, which we've kind of been doing off and on throughout. But like I think so. In the spirit of doing deconstructing directors and noticing things, one thing I notice, of course, is that what I've said before, the observation not made by me, but in fact made by James Cameron, that a lot of action directors cut too fast. They don't give you enough time to get a visceral sense, oh my God, I said it again, of what is actually happening in the moment. And so he holds longer shots than you might normally expect. I think there's a mistaken sense among many directors that like cutting faster gives you more of a sense that it's dangerous and frantic and the, it's a relatively simple chase. We've got a big semi and a kid on a dirt bike, and then a man on a Harley comes in. All things considered, relative to some of the shit we see nowadays, that's kindergarten. Yeah. But he manages to make it extremely riveting and exciting, and you're on the edge of your seat, even if you've watched it a million times, and it's just the I don't know, like the veracity of it and the willingness to hold on the action. Like even the bit where all that's really happening is Arnold is coming up behind the semi on the motorcycle, and he kind of jukes left, realizes he's not going to be able to get past that way, and then jukes right and slips between the semi and the wall just as it crashes into the wall. Yeah. And I mean, I guess maybe part of it is that we know that stunt people were doing all these things, or something that was pretty dangerous and similar to the thing that we're witnessing. Maybe that's what makes it a little bit more exciting. I'm just trying to what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to do the thing where I'm like, movies these days suck, because that's not true. Like I don't really believe that. It's just like, I'm thinking of car chase scenes that I've seen in recent movies where just objectively way crazier things were happening, and I cared not at all.
Yeah.
And it's just, I guess it's a lot of stuff. Like it usually the crazier the car chase, the more that there's not really any stakes, because it's just that kind of movie. It's just a cartoon.
Yeah.
And this is a movie that I think makes you feel like there are stakes. Even if you watched it 50 times, you feel like there are stakes somehow. I don't know how he does that exactly, but
well, I mean, one of the things that is fun about that to me is that like you can probably guess going into this movie that John Connor is not going to die, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Sarah Connor has fulfilled her role in this whole scenario, right? So like there's moments in this movie where, even though I've seen it a bunch of times, I was like, ooh, they're kind of gesturing that Sarah might just actually die, like that Sarah might just be killed,
mm-hmm.
and everyone's gonna have to deal with that. And I think that helps with the stakes a little bit. Not that establishing stakes, the only way to do that is by genuinely believing the characters are going to die. That's just not accurate. Like the first Terminator movie had wonderful established stakes, and no way in the world was Sarah Connor ever going to be murdered in that movie. That's just not the way it's going to work.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think in this movie, like, they have a little bonus advantage of that, where the only person that you're pretty confident is going to make it out of this thing alive is John himself.
Mm-hmm. I think maybe I'm trying to figure this out. I'm trying to figure out why I feel that there are such stakes, which is almost a silly thing to say for a film you've seen more than once, not to mention a million times. And I think it's that this is one of those films where we are actually made to feel that the protagonist is weak and vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you in contrast, when you think about some, superhero film or some film that's about like badass, detectives who are, driving their sports cars around, like you don't feel like they're vulnerable. You feel like they're badasses. There's none of this feeling of danger, because it's just like, if anything, they're often like the aggressor in the chase scenes. And here we have John Connor on this dinky little dirt bike with the the semi riding up on the bumper of it at moments, and you're like, oh,
mm-hmm.
he's like seconds from death, clearly, and you can really feel that. So I think it's a storytelling. I don't. It's not just like, oh, he's a really good director. Like, obviously he is, but he also knows how to write a story, which we've talked about a few times, obviously, where the story is constructed to make you care a tremendous amount and then feel like your characters are in danger. Very similar to what he does in Terminator 1, really.
Yeah.
So, and then what he does in Aliens, for that matter. So
yeah, no, I think you're onto something there for sure. I also think just generally, like, this movie is more, it's not just about John Connor surviving to the end, right? It's about trying to prevent Judgment Day, right?
Mm-hmm.
So our stakes are a little bit more complicated and a little bit more like, are they going to succeed?
Mm-hmm.
Are they going to destroy the things they need to destroy? Are they going to stop Cyberdyne? Like our stakes don't always need to be, will our hero survive the day?
Mm-hmm.
And that they're multi-layered. Like you care about John, but you want Arnold to learn how to be human too, and you want Sarah to remember what it's like to be human, and you want John to live up to his potential. I mean, I think one of the greatest ironies of this movie is that by doing what they've done, John Connor has actually eliminated his importance. He doesn't, by preventing Judgment Day, you're basically saying, oh, we don't actually need you to be John Connor anymore, John Connor. Which is interesting.
Yeah, as long as you're willing to completely write off literally all of the subsequent movies.
Yeah, I guess maybe that's a way to end Terminator. I mean, this is the last time we'll be talking about it with Jim Cameron, because he wasn't involved in any of the other ones except like an executive producer role. But like, why do you think every movie after this one has been bad? And I do mean every movie. Like, there's a small subset of people out there that think that Terminator Dark Fate, the newest one, is a good movie. I disagree with you. I think it's one of the better sequels, which is commendable, but it doesn't make it good. I think it's a bad movie. So what is about this series that like we did 2, and is there just nothing left to do with this concept? Is it just the concept was mined after 2, or what is it about this that all these movies are so bad, Matt?
A couple of things come to mind. I mean, I think the first explanation in any kind of question like this always has to just be simple regression to the mean. Like, there are only so many times that you can make, sort of genre defining films. And we have a fluke here, which is that we have the Terminator and Terminator 2 both being these beloved genre defining films. It would be a bit much to expect like 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 would also be beloved genre defining films. Like you just have to be really lucky for that to be the case. So just in some sense, like it's kind of lightning in a bottle and you can't rely on it. And then, okay, so that's just a statistical argument. That's not really very specific. The specific argument would basically be like, okay, now we as filmmakers approaching all the subsequent sequels are hemmed in by this mythology, which is not really our mythology because it's James Cameron's mythology. And James Cameron is a very smart man, and he was using his mythology to explore these themes and feelings and ideas. And every subsequent director who approaches it is basically like, well, it's a bunch of shit that has to happen in the movie. We have to have the scene where the 2 Terminators come back in time. We have to have some kind of shape-shifting Terminator forever now. We have to have Arnold Schwarzenegger probably, even if he's fully CGI. And we probably have to have John Connor, and et cetera, et cetera. No room for new twists. I think Salvation, the one where they actually go into the future, that was the only one that kind of breaks the formula. And I think it was kind of fun. Like that would probably be my favorite of the sequels. Not that I'm saying it's good or that I particularly like it. It's just my favorite.
It's at least trying to do something different.
Yeah.
Which gives it a lot of points. But yeah, I don't think it's a particularly good movie. But
so, do you have any thoughts as to why these movies have circled the drain ever since T2?
Yeah, I really think it's just Star Wars syndrome, which is that like the longer any franchise exists, the more beholden it becomes to itself, and that eventually destroys itself. I mean, you could argue it happened way faster in these movies than it did in a lot of other franchises. Way faster is a relative term because Terminator 3 didn't come out for like a decade, right? I forgot when that movie came out, but there was a big lag between T2 and Terminator 3.
Yeah, I think we were in college when T3 came out.
So. Yeah, I think so too. I also think like it's interesting because like you can't say that like, because part of what my answer wanted to be was like, well, they've prevented Judgment Day, so any future movie has to like fuck with that. But the funniest thing about that is this movie just completely said fuck you to everything that was established in the first one, right? Like the entire point of Terminator is it's this kind of self-contained deterministic loop that the reason why John Connor exists is because the Terminator was sent back in time to try to kill John Connor. And so it is literally impossible to change anything because that's just the way time travel works in this universe. And then T2 went, nope. It went nope to the effect that the movie opens on a voiceover from Sarah Connor where they're like, they sent 2 back, actually. We just forgot to mention that there were 2, but they always sent 2 back. That's what always happened. And then, of course, they're changing and rewriting things. So it's not as if like T2 really respects the lore of the series at all. And perhaps it is just the other movies were so beholden to that lore that frankly never made any sense to begin with, that it just kind of ruins the movie.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think that, I don't know. I guess I'm thinking about the Aliens sequels as well, because you could have the same exact discussion about how Alien and Aliens are these great, again, genre defining films. And then all the subsequent films were bad. What's interesting is that I think like Alien 3 and maybe even Alien 4 were at least doing interesting, weird, crazy things. Like Alien 3, weird movie. And I like that movie, by the way. We did a whole episode on it in our Deconstructing Fincher series.
I like Alien 4. It's not a good movie, but it's fascinating.
It's a very weird and creative movie, and it's taking the idea in places where it hasn't been taken before, and frankly, maybe not good ideas, but it's being creative. It's being weird. It's having the balls to be weird. And I feel like all the new Terminator movies, maybe because they're just sort of more action, less horror, they're just paint by numbers. Whereas Aliens, if anything, the criticism is the opposite direction, where it's like it became too weird.
Yeah. Prometheus.
Yeah. So, I think you let it out of Cameron's hands, and it's not going to be the same thing anymore, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, the simplest answer is literally just Jim Cameron wasn't involved. And I think he's a smart man, and he's obviously not a man that like doesn't like sequels. He's going to be making Avatar movies until he dies. But I think he rightfully recognized the right time to get out of this particular franchise.
Yeah. Right. I mean, I think he does what he thinks is interesting and is going to be good, and where he has something that he can kind of add. And I don't know how far away we are from Avatar in terms of movie count, but I mean, Titanic is coming up pretty soon too, and that's another example of the same point I wanted to make, which is he seems to view movies like, at least in large part, as a way of doing science experiments with filmmaking. Where he's like, okay, we currently we can't do this, or no one would even try to do this. It would be insane to try to do X. So I'm going to figure out how to do X. And everybody's going to freak out because it's going to be something they've never seen before. And that's what T-1000 was. That's what a lot of the stuff in this movie was. It was, one of the reasons it was so beloved is that the special effects were amazing, and they were integrated with the story in a way that we hadn't seen before. And
Oscar-winning special effects, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
One of only like 3 movies in which it's a sequel whose original movie was nominated for 0 Oscars and who won an Oscar.
I remember like magazine articles and newspaper articles about like the amazing special effects of Terminator 2 back when this movie came out. Like it was a big deal. It was. And then the funny thing is, the same thing happens again with Titanic, and the same thing happens again with Avatar, where everybody freaks out. And the movie does incredibly well, not because of a massive advertising budget, but because of the massively good word of mouth, because everybody loves the movies.
Yeah.
And I'm going to save this rant for when we talk about Avatar properly, but everybody's just full of shit. Because everybody who saw that movie loved it, and then when they told their friends that it was awesome, they said, we have to go see this movie. That's why Avatar did well.
Yeah.
Because everybody loved Avatar. It's like people are like, oh, Avatar was just Dances with Wolves. It's like no one at the time was saying that, okay? Now you're saying that because it's fun to be cynical.
Yeah, and also, even if it is just, who cares? Like,
right.
So, yeah, like, there's 1,000 movies where you can say, it's just this.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
all stories have been told before. Shut up.
Avatar is not my favorite movie. It's not my favorite Jim Cameron movie, but yeah, I'm kind of sick of the Avatar cynical takes, and I look forward to revisiting that movie.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I mean, I think like the reason why Jim Cameron has not been involved in the rest of these Terminator movies is he just it's not even that he doesn't see a story hook. I think he doesn't see a special effect hook. I think he's just kind of, he did like the reason he made this movie, I think, was the T-1000. And I think Cameron's a good enough filmmaker where he goes, okay, I have this really cool special effect I want to do, but I understand enough about movie making that I know I have to have a good story. And I think that was something that was instilled in him very early in his career, that like, like special effects are great, and I love that you love them, Jim, but you have to build a story around the stuff. And so he does pay attention to that kind of thing. But really the motivating factor is, I want to try this cool new special effect that no one's ever done. And that's what brought him to T2. I think that's what brings him to Titanic. That's what brings him to Avatar. And like, I really don't think like the world or the story of Avatar is what's keeping him in this thing for 5 movies. I think he has probably like 4 distinct, incredibly insane sequences that require special effects that no one's ever done before.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, the Avatar universe is a perfect one to do those in. So that's what I'm going to do.
That's, I honestly, we can start talking about this now because we're going to be doing Avatar at some point soon. I'm extremely excited about the Avatar movies, and that is exactly why. It's because he wouldn't be making them if there wasn't some amazing thing we've never seen before that he had in store for us.
Hell yeah.
And think about that. Like, what have we not seen before? We have like half of every MCU movie is like fully CGI now. So what could he possibly be planning? And the thing is, I have confidence in him. I'm like, you know, he's gonna do something. He's gonna do something that is somehow still gonna blow our minds, despite the fact that we feel like we're inundated with this stuff.
Yeah, I'm totally in agreement there. I can't wait. I can't wait to see Avatar 2.
Yeah, me too.
But we're not quite there yet. Before we get to Avatar, we've got to go through some True Lies, because that is the next Jim Cameron movie we're going to be talking about. True Lies, 1994's True Lies. Man, this is a movie that I'm kind of nervous about it, because I think I love this movie to death. And I also really remember it as being a very, ooh, yikes movie at the same time.
I mean, it's his only comedy, as far as I know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an action comedy, is what it is. Like, it's not to be taken seriously, and that's a departure for him.
Sure, absolutely. So that will be our next Deconstructing Cameron episode, True Lies. If you want to watch along with us, you better get on it now, because True Lies is not available to stream anywhere. You got to buy it. You got to buy a DVD, like I did.
That's so weird.
It's very weird. Very weird.
Yeah.
But that is going to do it for Deconstructing Terminator 2. That was a fun conversation, as I predicted, Matt. Thank you.
Yeah. That was awesome. Always fun to talk about the old favorites.
But before we go for the week, we got to talk about this Ghostbusters trailer, Matt. So to set the stage for those that might not know, Ghostbusters, the 85, is it 85 or 84? 84 movie, as any child born in the 80s, is extremely important to me, because I watched it 1,000 times and I found it hilarious, and I didn't get all the sex jokes until I was older, which just made me appreciate it even more. It is one of those absolute lightning in a bottle movies that it should not have near been as good as it was, and they've continued to try to make a franchise out of it. The sequel wasn't as good. I still liked it because I was a dumb kid. The 2016 version wasn't that good. I still enjoyed it. And now we have Ghostbusters Afterlife. The big thing about this movie is directed by Jason Reitman, who is the son of Ivan Reitman, who directed the original. And that's a stunt directing, if I've ever seen one, because it should just be called Ghostbusters Nostalgia.
Uh-huh.
And the latest trailer is just eeping like, remember this, remember that? And it looks like the movie is literally like, based on this trailer, I saw the Zool dogs from the first one. There's even like a stack of books. There's like a stack of books, because in the original Ghostbusters, they were in a library and ghosts spookily stacked some books. So of course, in this Iowa town, there's going to be a stack of books. There's one of the ghosts that was the New York cab driver is just here as well for no fucking reason. There's more Stay Puffs, but they're mini this time because it's so adorable. And then of course we have both Dan Aykroyd and Bill Murray hinted at returning to this movie. And I just hate it, Matt. I hate everything this stands for, and it makes me angry. And I don't like being like this, because the world is such a cynical, terrible place that it doesn't need my cynicism. But why should I not hate this? Explain this.
It's got Paul Rudd, Scott. Everybody loves Paul Rudd.
That doesn't. I love Paul Rudd.
That's my reasoning.
You're not doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry. Like, it is just a product, right? Like, I mean that's the joke of bringing up Paul Rudd, is they were like, okay, people are gonna think this is stupid. How do we? We'll just pay Paul Rudd to be in it because everybody likes Paul Rudd, and then it looks like there's gonna be kids, so maybe they're gonna market it at kids.
Yeah, I mean, it's got the kid from Stranger Things, Finn Wolfhard, in it, so it's literally like, what if we do Stranger Things, but also Ghostbusters?
Yeah, and then you can get a whole new generation of kids to see it. I mean, you can view it as being a movie aimed at kids even, and not even aimed at us anymore, which is an interesting kind of possibility to consider that I hadn't really thought about. Like mostly when they've made these nostalgia films, they've been for us, the people who watch them as children.
Yeah.
But it's possible that now they're sort of in some cases thinking, hey, we should make these movies aimed at current children so that we can then milk them for nostalgia money later also.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like it's funny because we just had a conversation about a sequel, and I would never say that like there's no artistic integrity when it comes to sequels, because obviously there absolutely can be. We spent several years of our lives talking about web serial sequel.
Mm-hmm.
But most sequels are more likely to be, you know, what would make us money is if we just slapped this title that people liked the first time on this movie and then said that it was the part 2 of the thing.
Here's I think I've actually gotten to the bottom of why this bothers me so much. I think the 2016 Ghostbusters was not a very good movie. I for the record, I like that movie a lot. I watch it all the time, actually. I think it's a lot of fun.
Interesting.
I think Chris Hemsworth is like the most hilarious part of that movie. He's so good in it. I think it's a fun movie, and I think it's a movie that's like definitely leeching the Ghostbusters brand for some points, but I actually do think they were trying to do something different. Like, it's not the same villain. Like, there are callbacks to the other movies, but they're mostly harmless. Like some of the original cast show up, but they're like not playing their characters from the original movie because it's technically a different world. So yes, Bill Murray's in the movie, but he plays like a professional ghost skeptic or fraud or something. And so, like, I don't know. It's just like, if we have to live in a world where there's more Ghostbusters movies, I like that they're trying to do something different. It doesn't work in a lot of ways, but it's still a lot of fun. This Afterlife feels like that movie failed and they threw up their hands and said, okay, is this what you fucking want then? You want, like, we're just going to lean into every single nostalgic beat that we possibly can.
It's Ghostbusters, the rise of Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, this trailer reminded me of the Force Awakens trailer, where it hits all those beats where it's like, here's shit you've seen before, other shit you've seen before, actor you haven't seen, but they're holding the Ghostbusters thingy, and they're talking up voiceover. We know that voice. I know who that is. Another voiceover. I also know who that is.
Yeah,
it's the same exact formula of like making the nostalgia trailer. Also,
like the trailer opens with Dan Aykroyd's reading of the end times, like the Book of Revelation stuff from the first movie, and like that was kind of tongue in cheek. It it really was happening, but Ghostbusters was a comedy, and like this movie takes everything that was like kind of tongue in cheek and sarcastic and Bill Murray-y from that original movie, and then like plays it for super serious. Like listening to like serious doom and gloom music over Dan Aykroyd talking about the Book of Revelation, I just roll my fucking eyes because it's just like, y'all,
right? Yeah,
come on.
This is a movie where Gozer was wearing a sequin leotard.
Yeah. This is a movie where Ernie Hudson says, Ray, if someone asks you if you're a god, you say, yes. And is that line going to be in this movie? 100% it is. 100% someone's going to say that in this movie.
Yeah. I mean, I think we forget how big of a part, shit, I'm forgetting the actor's name. The comedic actor who's Volga Silduar, the keymaster, or the gatekeeper, whichever one is not.
Oh, God, why can't I not remember? All I'm thinking of was Louis Tully, which is his character name, but I can't think. Rick Moranis. There we go.
Rick Moranis. Yeah, Rick Moranis being way more overtly comic than even the lead comic actors of the film, right? He's being ridiculous and he's running around and he's like just a constant like
20 minutes of Ghostbusters is Rick Moranis being locked out of things.
Yeah.
Like that's how much of that takes place in this movie.
I mean, it's funny. I've never really considered how important Rick Moranis is to the functioning of Ghostbusters as a film, but he absolutely is. And you take out the Rick Moranis. Like, it's very telling to me that the voiceovers that we get are Bill Murray and not Rick Moranis. So actually, is Rick Moranis even still alive?
Yes, he's still alive. He just has retired from acting.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good for him.
I also just want to point out, I'm looking at the cast for Ghostbusters Afterlife right now, and there's a character played by a little kid called Logan Kim, and the character's name is Podcast. I'm not kidding. There's a character named Podcast in this movie.
Uh-huh.
I don't even know what that means.
Okay. All right.
So you have not walked me off the ledge, Matt. I really I try not to care about these things because ultimately it doesn't matter. Like, this movie's going to come and go. It's probably going to make a few $1 million. There's people like me are probably not going to like it. I'm sure some kids will watch it and enjoy it, and then we'll just move on with their lives. But also, I just watched this trailer and I just get mad. I just get mad because it's so soulless. It's like there's nothing here.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not gonna succeed in talking you off the ledge because it doesn't look very good to me either. And I mean, that's the thing, is you can't ever really recapture what Ghostbusters was, and because it's a comedy, you have to ask why you would even want to, because like the joy of a comedy is like freshness,
sure,
and the novelty of the premise and so forth. Like, do you want a Groundhog Day sequel? Do you want to? I mean, I could go through a list of like, I mean, in some cases, I think they did make like Airplane sequels and Police Academy sequels, but like that's because
they made like 7,000 Police Academy sequels and they were all bad.
Yeah, they were all bad. There you go. My theory is proven.
But counterpoint, Ghostbusters 2 rules.
Yeah, and Ghostbusters 2 like was weird. And they
made the Statue of Liberty move with pink slime.
It made the Statue of Liberty move with pink slime, and it had the creepy painting. Like, it was actually way scarier, I think. Like, as a kid, I was way more scared of the creepy painting than I was of the demon dogs, actually. Although both of them were pretty scary to me as a kid, to be honest.
They were. You know what's weirdly, like, the part of the movie that grossed me out and also fascinated me the most was when they're breaking characters out of the stone dogs at the end, when they're breaking Louis Tully and Dana Barrett out of the stone dogs, and they're like having to like judo chop the stone to get them out. Like that, like I just remember watching that and being like viscerally uncomfortable with this idea of being trapped in the stone dog and like slowly having to be broken out.
There's a surprising amount of genuine Lovecraftian horror in Ghostbusters. That's one of the things that makes it amazing, is it's this idea that this building has been built by these cultists to channel this like demonic energy. And there's she opens her fridge and the demon dog is in the fridge because there's just like portals to the other world opening up. And yeah, it's creepy. It's unsettling. I think it actually, I don't know. Like I actually thought about it a lot when I was a kid.
Yeah, there's a lot of moments that the opening the fridge freaked me out. The hands shooting out of the chair to wrap their self around Dana, that fucked me up as a kid. It's so funny because like, yes, it's obviously a comedy, but yeah, they did a lot of really dark stuff, dark 80s stuff that I don't think they would ever get away with doing these days.
I mean, that's one of the few things that could redeem a movie like this, is if you're willing to like get weird with it.
I hope they do. I just like just the idea that like we're gonna do Zool again is just so inherently exhausting to me. Like, even Ghostbusters 2 realized you can't just do Zool again. You got to make a painting guy.
Yeah. You know, I can't tell if it's just because I'm old and I've watched too many things now and I've read too many things, but I feel like now everything is just pastiche. I feel like everything that I see, even stuff that I really like, is, oh yeah, I've seen that before in this thing. Oh, that's an homage to that thing. very rarely do you see something where you're like, I've never seen anything like that at all, period.
I do think that's just part of getting older.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that like the more you watch and experience, the more you see the lines of connection. Like the first time you watch Star Wars, you have no idea that Star Wars is a pastiche of, 40s sci-fi serials.
Yeah.
But then you watch some 40s sci-fi series and you're like, oh yeah, this wasn't actually original at all. Gotcha.
Yeah,
okay.
Right. Yeah, and yeah, Dune, of course, which
Yeah.
which is itself. Which what's funny is now one of the things that I'm maybe ever so slightly complaining about is that a lot of the visuals from Dune were in fact homages to things, and I'm like, that's fine, right? It's just my brain knows that now.
Yeah, sure.
Kind of wish I didn't, almost, so that it could just seem overwhelmingly fresh. But I guess that's a silly complaint, since I cannot actually unknow things.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about this last week. Well, okay, we didn't talk last week, but I was listening to our conversation about video games that we posted on this channel last week, and one of the things I said was, the older I get, the more I'm seeking new experiences in my video games, and I think that's something that's true to my experience with art and movies and stuff. Is like I want to find that new thing, and yes, everything is probably a pastiche, everything is inspired by something else, but it doesn't mean it's not an experience that's new to you. And that's what I'm searching for constantly. And I mean, I think it's unfair to expect that in big tentpole blockbuster films. Like, it's just not fair to expect that kind of stuff, because I don't think the blockbuster movies, like since the invention of blockbuster movies, have ever truly been these original experiences. They just felt that way to us because that was the first time we were seeing them.
Yeah.
Like I legitimately think there's going to be some 8-year-old kid that is going to go watch Ghostbusters Afterlife, and they're going to fall in love with this movie. And they're going to be like, oh my God, this is great. And it's fun and it's funny and it's weird. And like, I love the little ghosts, the little Stay Puft. Like, that's going to happen for sure. No matter how good or bad the movie is, that is going to happen.
Yeah. It's funny because I was going to say one example I can think of a blockbuster that changed the world. That was a completely novel experience to everyone is The Matrix, which is true, but that's because most people hadn't read Neuromancer, or the lineage of cyberpunk sci-fi that led up to it, right? And so it was creative, but it was a lot less creative than everyone who was watching it maybe thought. And that's not a ding on The Matrix. That's just an acknowledgement that most everything comes from other things.
Yep, absolutely. So, in conclusion, let's go see Ghostbusters Afterlife. When does this movie come out? I think it comes out at the end of the month. I don't even know.
That would be hilarious if that were true, because I'd like never heard of it until you told me to watch the trailer.
November 19th, Matt. It's coming out in 10 days.
Well, you know what, Scott? I'm going to guess that this movie is bad, because otherwise they probably would have advertised it harder.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. The whole... It's all weird, right? Because this movie was supposed to come out last summer, and then COVID happened, and so I don't know. Like, I think studios are very cautious in spinning up another huge marketing spend, because they just have no idea how these movies are going to do. I don't know how this movie's going to do either. It's a Sony movie, so I don't think it's going to be day and date on streaming. I think it's going to be only in theaters. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's already some Rotten Tomatoes reviews out, and
yeah, I think it was screened for critics, and people were pretty rough about it.
Yeah, well, that doesn't.
A lot of critics are taking it as an opportunity to like use it as an example of what's wrong with Hollywood filmmaking right now. Which I like. After watching the trailer I just watched, I get 100%. I totally get why they're doing that.
Yeah. These Rotten Tomatoes reviews are very, very harsh.
I like this one from Allison Wilmore from New York Magazine. An homage to and a continuation of the 1984 Ghostbusters that painstakingly mines that movie for props, lines, and characters while giving no indication of being aware of what it was like to actually watch.
I don't think I'll be watching this one, Scott. Sorry.
This is what happens when the poor 2016 version does bad. I mean, that's I think part of it is that there were a lot of like very vocal, we'll call them Ghostbusters super fans that like were furious about them casting a version of the movie with 4 women in it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I remember like the angry video game nerd like guy like released a video that's like, I am going to refuse to watch Ghostbusters 2016, to which I was like, okay. So part of why I'm angry is it feels like with the creation of this movie, that subset of Ghostbusters fandom won. But it's probably not going to be a good movie, so they probably didn't necessarily win. But I don't know. But I can't help shake this feeling that like this is the movie that they wanted, not that other thing. And
maybe they'll watch this, realize it was bad, realize they were wrong, have a sort of profound spiritual crisis that they emerge from stronger and better, and then they go on to create great art, which we then appreciate years from now.
Wow, there we go. That's the most optimistic take I've ever heard, and I love it to death.
No fate but what we make.
I think that's a really great time to wrap it up for this week. So if you have any opinions on anything we talked about on Terminator 2 or on Ghostbusters Afterlife or the entire Ghostbusters franchise, you can reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com or on Twitter at doofmedia. You can also find us on Reddit, that's r/doofmedia, and Instagram, which is also at doofmedia.
Yeah, and if you're not already subscribed to the Doofcast, we encourage you to do so and ensure that you never miss an episode. You can find us on all of the major podcasting platforms, and if you don't find us on one, then let us know and we'll fix that.
Yeah, we'll add that right away. And if you like what we do here and want to support us, consider becoming a patron of Doof Media. Head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia, and you can pledge at the $5 level, which gives you access to our Doof After Dark bonus weekly episodes where we just chat about whatever. I think this week, Matt and I are going to talk about the experience of being sick, because that was my life for a week. So I hope you enjoy me complaining about being sick.
Yeah,
paying money to hear me complain about being sick.
I mean, it's my favorite thing to do, so, you know.
Also, this is going to be a pretty busy weekend for Doof Media, Matt. On Friday, we've got our makeup book club from 2 weeks ago, where I wasn't able to do that because I was sick. And on Saturday, we've got our makeup game club, which I wasn't able to do last Saturday because I was sick. So it's going to be a pretty stuffed Doof Media weekend. So make sure you subscribe to us on our YouTube channel so you can hang out with us. We're going to be talking about Ancillary Justice, the book, on Friday, and then The Forgotten City, the video game, on Saturday.
That's going to be fun. Can't wait for the very packed weekend, but exciting.
Yeah.
Also, please consider rating and reviewing the Doofcast on Apple Podcasts if you like what you hear. Every review does help us get more exposure and introduces new listeners to the content we make here.
That is right. We will see you folks next week, where we will be doing another episode of our Doof Canon series, where we're trying to find all the best movies in the world and induct them into the canon of great films. Our patrons are still voting on what movie we're going to be watching for that, so we can't announce it right here at the end. But we will announce it soon as that poll closes, and we'll be back to review it next week. So we'll see you all then.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.